be either looking at, turning to, or just referencing a number of scriptures. But I want to start out in Revelation chapter 20 here this morning. Revelation chapter 20. And these verses I'm sure most of us will be quite familiar with. And the target verse is verse 9, but let's start at verse 1, if you don't mind. Revelation 20, verse 1, on our way to verse 9. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. You know, this whole idea of 1,000 years is only mentioned a couple of places or so in the Bible. And yet it's very impactful as far as God's plan and purpose is concerned. So he bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that he must be loosed a little season. And I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. In other words, the privilege to judge. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again, until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. So he went on to describe the first resurrection and some of the things involved in it, and the blessings for some in this first resurrection. So he goes on to say, you don't want to miss the first resurrection. That's what he's saying. Verse 6. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So he keeps referencing this 1,000 years that's commonly known to us as the millennium, the millennial reign of Christ. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations. In other words, he's going to pick up where he left off, 1,000 years later. And shall go out and deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth. That's this army that he's gathered now. They went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. Fire came down from God out of heaven, and devoured them. And then I'll just read verse 10. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. So that's the picture that we're given by John, who was given the vision on the Isle of Patmos of what would transpire in these last days. I'm interested in the last days. I believe we're living in the last days. And of course, we talked about this before, that the last days, plural, really began with the ministry of Christ. Now, if you look at this idea of 1,000 years, and Peter said 1,000 years is as a day to the Lord, and a day is as 1,000 years. So if we look at it from that perspective, that man has been alive and serving God, well, he's been alive and working on this earth for 6 millennia, 6 days, 6,000 years. And so we see this is pointing to the 7th day, or the 7th 1,000-year period, and what's going to transpire. So some good things are going to happen for some, but some things are going to not be so good for others. Well, I want to call your attention to this word camp here in verse 9. Let's read verse 9 again. So picture now this. The devil's been loosed for this after 1,000 years of being imprisoned, and now he is primed. He wants to pick up where he left off, go out and deceive the nations yet again. He's just, he's so focused. It doesn't matter that you interrupt him. You turn him loose, and he goes right back to what he was doing, because that's his core. His core is evil. Okay, I mean, you can distract somebody, I suppose, but if their core is evil, they won't be distracted for long. They go right back to what they were meant to do and were wanting to do. So verse 9 again. And they, this massive army that you can't even count, it was so broad, so large, and they went up on the breadth of the earth, on the whole horizon, and compassed the camp of the saints about. The camp of the saints. Interesting, this word camp. It's a military term. It's also translated elsewhere in our Bibles as barracks. Now I want you to think about this. We've talked about where the saints are going to dwell. They're going to be dwelling in Jerusalem. Now picture this. The whole world will be the kingdom, right? The whole world is the king's domain. And every kingdom has to have a capital, a seat of government. And so we find that when Jesus returns, he comes to Jerusalem, the place where God has placed his name and has had his eye on for quite a while. And Jesus descends and he ends up in Jerusalem on the throne of David, all as prophesied. And all around are nations of people. Now there's some people in the city, but the majority of people are outside of the city. Okay? And those are the ones that the devil, when he's loose, goes out to deceive. The nations, not the people in the city. There's a clear separation here. And so he refers to basically the people in the city as the camp of the saints, of the holy ones. And so we find that this word is translated as barracks. Now keep your place here. Actually, we probably were done with this passage here. Let's just travel through a few verses in the book of Acts. Let's go to Acts chapter 21. Acts 21. This, of course, is following Paul's ministry as he went about trying to make disciples. 21. Let's look at... we may have to back up just a little bit. Let's look at verse 27 on our way to verse 34. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, saw Paul, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him, crying out, Men of Israel, help! This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place. And further brought Greeks into the temple and hath polluted this holy place. He's defiled the temple. Paul brought Gentiles. Okay? Of course, Paul had prepared those Gentiles before he brought them in. Nonetheless, they were disciples, but nonetheless, in their eyes, they were Greeks, they were Gentiles, and they had polluted or defiled the temple, being Gentiles. For they had been seen before him in the city of Trophimus, an Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. And all the city was moved, and the people ran together. And they took Paul and drew him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut. And as they went about to kill him, tidings came unto the chief captain of the band that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. Now, I've read this passage many, many times. In fact, the whole city in an uproar, people just run around, just a lot of confusion. Verse 30, all the city was moved and the people ran together, and all of this mob activity. But never have I really appreciated what's going on here until you see on television the events of the Middle East. And the cameramen over there, the news reporters over there, and they show people out in the streets. And they're just total mobs. And they swarm. That's what happened to our ambassador over there. They swarmed him. They were just animalistic. Okay? And this is what happens when these people get an idea in their minds and are so bent on it. Okay? This is what happens. And so they're about ready to kill Paul. They want to kill him. Okay? And as they're doing this, word comes to the chief captain of the band, verse 31, that all Jerusalem was in an uproar, who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down unto them. And when they saw the chief captain and the soldiers, they left beating of Paul. So here the Roman soldiers come in with their shields and their spears and their swords, and they say, okay, well, it backed off, okay, because of the presence of the military there. Then the chief captain came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and demanded who he was and what he had done. And some cried one thing and some another among the multitude. And when he could not know the certainty for the tumult, he commanded him to be carried into the barracks, into the castle. Okay? So for his own protection against the angry mob, they took him and put him in the barracks. This is our word camp. Okay? So there were Roman barracks throughout. And one was over nearby the temple. And they were, because the Romans occupied the Holy Land. So they had to have their presence there with their soldiers. So they had barracks, places where the soldiers could go to further their military experiences there. And so they brought Paul into that safe area, okay, to keep him from being beaten to death. Let's go over to verse 37, same chapter. Well, let's just keep reading since we're so close to that verse. Okay? So he carried him to the castle, verse 34, 35. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was borne of the soldiers. They had to carry him for the violence of the people, trying to grab him apparently and pull him away. And so they had to carry Paul up the stairs of the barracks. For the multitude of the people followed after, crying, "Away with him!" And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, "May I speak unto thee?" Who said, "Canst thou speak Greek? Art thou not that Egyptian which before these days made an uproar and led us out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers?" Paul said, "I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, no small city, unimportant city. And I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people." Isn't that like Paul? These people were this close to killing him. And he's rescued by the Romans. And instead of thinking, "Oh, thanks guys, boy, that was a close one, get me on in there," he's up this stairway and he says, "Stop. I want to talk to these people." They have a safe distance now. He had the Roman guard protecting him. So it was all about others, not Paul. Isn't it amazing? I just find that very, very, it just refreshes me, and it's so in character with Paul. So he says, "Let me speak to the people." And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs, beckoned with the hand unto the people. I can imagine he put his hand up, the roaring, the shouting, "Away with him! Kill him!" And Paul just beckoned with his hands to quiet the crowd. Just quiet the crowd. You see people do this even today. And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying, "Men, brethren, fathers." He's making his connection, isn't he? Okay, reminding them. They knew who he was. Okay, men, brethren, fathers. Okay, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. So he's speaking to them in Hebrew, in their own tongue, and that gave him, it piqued their interest. Okay, all right. So let's move on from that. The point being that these were the barracks provided by the Romans. Let's take another trip to Acts 23, at verse 10. And when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should have been pulled in pieces of them, commanded the soldiers to go down and to take him by force, rush in there, okay, with all of their military presence and instruments of warfare, go in there and push through the crowd and grab Paul and carry him out of there. Okay, bring him into the barracks. Again, so we're just finding this word is used throughout the book of Acts to give us the idea that there was a place, a safe haven there, provided for by Rome for its soldiers who had occupied that area. It's not too surprising also, as we go back to Revelation 19, that Jesus, when he's returning, is accompanied by an army. They're referred to as an army. So we've got two things going on here. We've got Jesus returning in the clouds with the army following him on horses as he makes his descent to this earth, with one thing in mind: to take the kingdom, to wrestle the kingdom away from the ungodly crowd that has had it now for this length of time. And so his army is with him. So we've got his disciples referred to as an army. He's going to take them into the barracks. Interesting, isn't it? Okay? I just find this fascinating as we kind of piece these things together. I'm reminded, as far as this separation goes, the place of safety, the barracks, the camp of the saints, Jerusalem, where Jesus will dwell with his people forever, referred to as the bride. There'll also be the priesthood. There's different layers here, as we've been noting. The whole idea of this separating people out. You see, today, people are opposed to the idea of separation. They're trying to get rid of borders. They're trying to have a uniculture instead of a multiculture. We see Britain finally saying, enough of this stuff. Okay, if we're going to last as a nation at all, we've got to do something, got to pull back on this thing. Okay? And so, well, didn't that cause a little stir around the world? Okay? But, I mean, these people are insane. There's a radio host that says borders, language, and culture. Borders, language, and culture. Okay? Very important to preserve your identity as a people. Well, this whole idea of separating out isn't something new with the New Testament. Travel back to the Old Testament, and we see the man named Jacob. Okay? And kids, what was Jacob's other name? What was Jacob's other name? Esther. Israel. Okay? So he had how many sons? 12 sons. Okay? But there was one son in particular that he seemed to favor, and that was Joseph. Okay? Even provided him a special wardrobe, okay? A special coat of many colors, right, kids? Okay? And so it's interesting as we go back to Genesis 37, the dynamics between these siblings. Okay? We see this again. We look at the book of Revelation. We see this separating, the idea of people being separate and close to the Lord. You go to the first book of the Bible, and we see something very similar, very in character with God. So we go to Genesis 37. I can find it myself here. And let's just start at verse 1. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. Of course, that'd be Abraham and Isaac. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, and his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably unto him. They couldn't bring themselves to be nice or kind to him because of the situation. They hated him. So verse 5, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. Probably shouldn't have told them that, but this was all, of course, God's hand involved in this. But I mean, if you know people hate you, are you going to tell them, especially the dream that he dreamed? Probably not a good idea. But again, it was all part of God's purpose. For behold, we were binding, so he's telling them the dream, okay? And he said to them, hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood round about, and they're waiting. Yeah, okay. And bowed down to my sheaf. Okay, that's all we needed to hear. That's it, okay. And his brethren said to him, shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream. Oh, he did. Some people, they just invite problems, right? They're inviting and inciting this situation. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the same. So when we look at the book of Revelation and we see people separated out, we're not surprised. It's very much in the character of God to separate people out, to push forward a purpose. Because he realizes not everyone is going to be on board with the purpose. Okay? Look around you. Think of the situation today. Is everybody on board with Jesus today? Is everybody on board with the Bible and its authority today? Is everyone on board with Israel being a favored nation of God in the Scriptures? They're not. The majority are not. Of course, we're seeing a rise of anti-Semitism all throughout Europe, even in this country. We're seeing it on the increase. Well, we're not surprised. It has to increase. Everything has to ramp up, as Paul said. Prior to the coming of Jesus, it would be as a woman giving birth. The labor pains will become closer together, and they become more painful until that child is born. Okay? And so we're seeing these things continue to develop. Now, this whole idea of separation, sure, the Pharisees, the Sadducees had all of this record. They had the Torah, they had all of this. They read these stories, all of this. But they didn't quite get it when Jesus came along and began to issue all these warnings of they themselves not making it, okay, as the sons of God. Let's go over to Matthew chapter 8, where Jesus, again, reinforces this idea of separation. That would be Matthew 8. And I've got verse 12 here, but we may have to look at a few surrounding verses. Yeah, we're going to have to look at this whole passage here. Verse 5, in the context. And when Jesus was entered into Capernaum, there came unto him a centurion, beseeching him, of course, a Roman soldier, Roman officer, and saying, Lord, my servant lieth at home sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. And Jesus saith unto him, I will come and heal him. The centurion answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy that thou should come under my roof. Speak but the word, only, and my servant shall be healed. Imagine that kind of faith. Jesus spotted that kind of faith right off the bat. He says, For I am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this man, Go, and he goes. And to another, Come, and he comes. And to my servant, Do this, and he does it. So I'm a man of authority. I'm not just any ordinary citizen here. I'm a Roman officer. I've got 100 men underneath me. When Jesus heard it, he marveled, and said unto them that followed, Verily I say unto you, I have not found so great a faith, no, not in Israel. Here we've got not just a Gentile, but a Gentile working for Rome. Not just working for Rome, but in Rome's army. And he's got that kind of faith. Now we look at our leaders. We look at politicians, or even military officials, people of rank, people of notability, that are celebrities, or even celebrities, Hollywood. And should they express a faith in Jesus, we go, wow. You know, especially in this whole time of being politically correct, we go, wow, good for you, standing up. Okay? So this man was standing up and standing out. And so Jesus, wow, he says, I haven't seen that kind of courage, those kind of guts, even among Israel. what I'm seeing basically is the opposite. They're not responding to me and to my ministry and to the miracles and the messages as much as this soldier is. And so, that's what Jesus had more to say. He said, not in Israel. And I say unto you, that many shall come from the east and the west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom, those who would otherwise have been heirs of the kingdom, the people of God, of Israel, shall be cast out into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So he's giving them an early warning that they cannot rely upon their pedigree, their heritage, to get them through and to get them into the best spots, the best seats of authority in the kingdom. Okay? So later on he said, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And so he's warning them that there's going to be a separation in the kingdom. And they just might very well end up in the loser end. Okay? And that's another thing. We seem to kind of want to do away with this idea of winners and losers. We want to kind of just push everything down to kind of just equal every, there's no prizes, there's no rewards. We're just celebrating the fact that you tried. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to push everything down. And so everyone gets a blue ribbon. Yeah, but I just sat on the bench. Oh, well, you get a blue ribbon anyway. Here you go. Thanks for coming. Okay. So everything just kind of washed out. Okay. But it wasn't that way back in our day. It wasn't that way. Okay. There were clear winners and there were clear losers. Okay. Not everybody got the same prize, but even in the Olympics, they go that far back. Shows you that. How many medals? Gold, silver, and oh, I'm so sorry. Well, at least he medaled. Okay, at least he medaled. He got the bronze. Okay. Anyway. All right. All right. But Jesus is warning them. Matthew 22. Let's stay in Matthew here. Go to chapter 22. The dumbing down of a society. That's what we got here. The dumbing down of a society. That's why Jesus said, when the Son of Man comes, will he find that faith, the faith on the earth? We have been dumbed down to. Okay, that's why he said to the elect, keep your eyes peeled. Okay? Stay sharp, focus, pray, watch. Okay, so Matthew 22:13. But here again, in this context, there is a marriage separate. There's a separation. Okay. We're just going to have to read it. We're going to have to read it. I'm sorry, this is lengthy, but we're going to have to read it to catch the context. And Jesus answered and spake unto them again, by a parable, said, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king which made a marriage for his son, and sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding. And they would not come. So he's got his servants bidding those who were not his servants. Okay? Again, he sent forth other servants, saying, tell them which are bidden or called, behold, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready. Come unto the marriage. But they made light of it and went their way, one to his farm, another to his merchandise, all kinds of excuses. And the remnant took his servants and treated them spitefully and slew them. That's what you do when you don't like the messenger. You just kill him. Okay? But when the king heard thereof, he was wroth, he was angry, and he sent forth his armies, and destroyed those murderers, and burned up their city. There are consequences for bad choices. There are consequences. This is a parable, but aren't there consequences for bad choices? We all know this. Okay? We make a bad decision, a bad choice, and sometimes we have to just live through it, live with it. By God's grace, we get through it. That's true. The whole idea is to gain wisdom along the way. Then he said to his servants, the wedding is ready, but they which were bidden or called are not worthy. So he got some who are his servants who are clearly worthy, and some who are not worthy. Again, separation. Go ye therefore into the highways, and as many as ye shall find, bid, call, invite to the marriage. So those servants went out into the highways, and gathered together all as many as they found, both bad and good, and the wedding was furnished with guests. So instead of going to what would you say it? Invitee list number one, the best, the choice. Okay, all the high-ranking people, or the nobility people, the cream of the crop people. Now you're going to go down to list number 2, 3, 4. Wouldn't have been considered. But now I'm going to send you out to those people. Okay. All right. So he says here in verse 11, and when the king came in to see the guests, he saw there a man which had not on a wedding garment. And he saith unto him, Friend, how camest thou in hither not having a wedding garment? He was speechless. Then said the king to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. And so here again, he's trying to crash the party, make himself like he's ready, prepared to partake of this festivity, but he found out that he was not prepared, and so he found himself being escorted, tied up hand and foot, and escorted way out into the outer regions. Talk about humiliating. The principle that Jesus taught his disciples, he says, when you're gathering together, don't seek out the best seats right off the bat. Because if you're sitting there in the balcony, the best seats, the host of the whole thing may have to come and tell, oh, come down here, that seat's for you, down over there, 10th row, seat 12, okay? No one can see you, it's in the shadows, okay? So you go from clear, high visibility, high profile, to like, we don't even know you're here, okay? How humiliating. Jesus said, when you walk in, seek out the lower seats. And then you may be then invited up into the balcony. Okay? Then there's honor, okay? And so that's the whole idea. But not the Pharisees, oh no. They're seeking the best, the recognition, all of this. Totally 180 out of phase with what Jesus was trying to teach. So he's warning them that you people are not going to necessarily get what you're thinking you're going to get. Okay? All right, let's look at one more. 24:51. 24:51. 45. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat and food in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So here again, Jesus is giving warnings that not everybody is going to end up with the very same slice of pie at the very end. That there's a responsibility and accountability on our part if we want the very best. Imagine this. Brother Ward gave this illustration. You got a backslidden Christian, totally backslidden, finds himself like the prodigal son, back out into the world, maybe after serving Jesus for a while, got into church and just really gung-ho, but then, something happened, whatever. He finds himself on the outs. He finds himself now not appreciating his salvation. He's totally backslidden. Finds himself in a bar with others there, and drowning his sorrows in beer or whatever. And just as he takes that glass of beer, raises it to his lips, and he finishes off, and here comes the foam. Yeah, I've had beer. I picture this, okay? I tell people, you know what? I quit drinking when I was 21, when I turned 21. Okay, so I go, wow. Just when it was, anyway. So the foam's coming down, and just at that moment, the rapture. And this guy is just raptured off the bar stool. The beer glass falls to the floor, shatters in a million pieces, and this guy is now dressed in bridal garments. Hey, not bad, okay? And he's in there with the rest of them, goes marching into the city. Hey, this is, wow, nice place, Totally odd. Totally odd, okay? Now that man won't lose his salvation, granted. Okay, you're saved by the blood of Christ, granted. But not everybody is going to end up sitting there eating and drinking with Jesus in his kingdom. Amen? It ain't going to happen. Okay? And this idea of separating or filtering out the serious and non-serious, the believers and those that stop believing, is clear in the scriptures, from Genesis to Revelation. It's so clear. And yet there are some who come along and try to, encourage people, tickling their ears and say, you know what, it doesn't matter if you serve Jesus, as long as you're saved, you're going to be in the bride. It doesn't matter what you do after that. Okay? So I don't care if you're as energetic and faithful as Paul and these others we see in the book of Acts, or if you're just some backslidden, believer. You're all going to get there. You're all going to be the white garment. You're going to get the crown. For what? What did you do? So God is not a socialist. He's not a Bernie Sanders. Not everyone's going to get the same. Okay? It's all based on merit, on reward. Saved by grace first, saved unto good works. Those good works are rewarded with crowns and a position. That is so biblical. Okay? Yet these jokers calling themselves pastors would want their people to just believe, don't worry about it. You're saved, aren't you? Okay? We're all going to get the same. Okay? I hope they don't preach that up in Canada, because we're not preaching that here. Okay? But there are some that do. All right. All right. Let me turn the page here. So this whole idea of separation and a camp, a barracks, where there's safety, where there's a separated body of, whether it be Roman soldiers or whatever. There is a camp today. There is a barracks today that is a safe haven where God's people can come into and there be protected by the world. If they keep their faith strong and they pray and they read, there is a barracks, a camp today of the saints. That place is none other than the ecclesia. The Lord's New Testament church, okay, itself is a place, a safe haven for God's people. But that being said, each individual ecclesia church will be as strong or as weak as its members. Amen? So you will make this ecclesia, this assembly, you will make it as strong as it could be in the Lord, or you will weaken it, its influence, its character. So you will contribute to its strength or its demise. Every member has that responsibility. Think about it. You're on a football team, and you see everyone hustling. You got your linemen, offensive linemen, you got your quarterback, you got your defense, all these positions, and then there's one guy just kind of dogging it. And he's not for the team, he's for himself. Okay? And so we find that because he's dogging it, they start losing games. Okay? Because he's not holding up his position like everybody else. And so they start losing games. The team suffers. And so that's like the New Testament church. Everyone, we're members of one another. And everyone supplies that intricate, unique part that only you can provide. That's right, only you can provide. Collectively, we can all pray. Right? We all pray. We can all witness. We can all give our offerings. We can all come. But where it's unique and individual is what you bring with your talents, your unique gifts and talents, what interests you have. You pour that into the one pot, and there it melts, and we are brethren in Christ. Amen? And we appreciate one another on that level. I appreciate what you bring individually. And then collectively, we provide strength. In that reference I made earlier about that one talk show host, his phrase, his whole thing is borders, language, and culture. We talk about a New Testament church being that camp, that barracks. We talk about borders. The Lord's given borders to his camp. Okay? 2 ordinances. baptism and the Lord's Supper. Those are the borders. Okay? Those are not given out to everybody. Okay? We close the borders. And so we only receive baptism, we only administer baptism upon someone who has accepted Jesus as their Savior. Okay? Not to be saved, but because they have been saved. Amen? Can I get an amen? Amen. Okay? Borders. Coming to the Lord's Supper. Okay? Borders. Okay? Those who have come into this body and are tied to this body, their interests, their concerns, their love is to this body as a flock. Paul says, as a bread, as many pieces, many members, but one bread, one loaf. Okay, and so we don't open up the Lord's Supper to everybody. Okay, borders. Okay, we have to have that same identity. Language. The language we use. We use the term salvation, saved, safe. Okay, it's got to mean the same to all of us. Okay, and so we use certain terms that we find in the Scriptures that we commonly use and we collectively use. Okay, it tells us who we are. Okay, when we're speaking the same thing. Paul said, I wish he would speak the same thing. See, he wanted these churches to be mindful together, one body. Okay, one body moving in unison. Okay, not such a mixed group. You believe in this doctrine, you believe in that doctrine, but he kept trying to bring them to unity. Okay, amen? That was Paul's job. So we got borders, language, terms we use, baptism, only by immersion, not sprinkler or pouring. Okay? And then culture. Our culture is important. Our identity, who we are as a people. The history that we have as Anabaptists. We're studying Trail of Blood on Wednesday nights. Brother Philip's taking us through that booklet. But the lineage we have come through. The many millions of martyrs who stood for borders, language, and culture and died for it. They lived for Jesus, Sister Rachel. They died for Jesus. And they believed this. It wasn't something tacked on. It was their very fiber, their very core. It was what they came to believe. And they soaked themselves, they drenched themselves into that environment. Okay? And that's the difference between a Paul or a Timothy and some backslidden believer on the bar stool drinking beer. Okay? You got to totally absorb this. And if we do, and Jesus really is put first, and I know, Noah, to you what you said earlier, there's times where we really don't feel we're putting Jesus first. The expression is life happens. Okay? And I had to, someone came up to me at the conference, so the girl that sang a special, and she was really hard on herself. She was kind of beating herself up, just saying, I just don't feel worthy. I mean, I tried, but I know sometimes I think I just fail. I said, wait a minute now. You just got up there and sang a special for the Lord. Not everybody can sing. Not everyone even has the courage to get up in front of other people. And at your young age, no less. Don't be so hard on yourself. Give yourself a break. You're here, aren't you? You flew from Hawaii to come to Spokane. That's got to say something, right? Sometimes we're just too hard on ourselves. Okay? Give ourselves some a room to grow. You don't come out of the chute perfect, do you? How many come out of the chute perfect? Okay, don't put your hand down. Thank you. No one comes out of the chute perfect. We come out ready to grow. Okay, and so we give ourselves that room to grow. We're not going to grow on all facets, all channels, all levels, and all doctrines at once. Even Paul realized that. Okay, some people, he said, I'm going to give you this counsel, and I realize that not everyone's going to receive it. Okay, I forget where that's at. It might be Ephesians. But he said, but I'm confident that later on you will. You'll agree with what I'm saying and what others believe. Okay, so not everyone's on board right away. That's the growth process. But borders, language, and culture. Our culture is rich with with our forefathers who stood for these principles, who stood for these things. And you know, notice every once in a while I put into our bulletin a historical account of one of our brothers or sisters who were martyred for their faith in Jesus. Remember the young boy, young teen I guess he was, who sifted through the ashes after they burned his mother to the stake? He sifted through the ashes, looking for something. Remember that? Remember that? Okay, what was he looking for? He was looking for the tongue screw that they had drilled through her mouth and her tongue to the bottom of her mouth to keep her silent from witnessing. That would be his remains of his mom. Okay? A young man, your age probably. Maybe a little younger, but your age. Okay? That's dedication. How was that faith passed on? How was the faith transferred from mom to her teenage son? By her example of faith. Okay? I would imagine he grew up, and if he had children, that it would be his imitation of his mother's faith on through him to his children. Okay? That's how they lasted all those years. We're just another generation in succession of our brethren. Amen? We're up to bat now. We're up to bat. What are we going to do? Well, we certainly don't want to strike out. Okay? At least go down swinging. At least give it 3 good shots. Don't watch them just zing by a strike. Oh, what? That was not a strike. Hey, strike 2. Hey, I haven't even swung yet. Hang on here. Okay? Strike 3. You're out. I haven't even swung. That's the problem. Go down swinging. Okay? Empty the revolver. Don't go down with 6 bullets in the gun. Okay? Empty the silly thing. Okay? And so, kind of violent examples. All right. Borders, language, and culture. Okay? We hang on to these. And Jesus will tell us in Matthew 25, as I close. We know the parable of the talents. How that he, in this story, the parable, he called 3 of his servants to him. And now the picture is as a businessman. He's going to take a trip, so he leaves his business in the hands of 3 chief servants. And he gives them all specific orders to invest in the business and to grow the business while he's gone. You want to leave it in capable hands, right? And so he calls in these 3 and he gives them each so many money's worth called responsibility, depending on their ability. Yeah, well, you're a chief, you're a CEO in this company, so you get the 10. Okay, I know you can handle the 10. And you're a lower management, so I'm gonna give you 5. Okay, but that's still 5. You're the janitor, but you're still in my employ, so I'm gonna give you 1. Okay, I'm a janitor. That's I pick on the janitor. I'm a janitor. So he calls them, he distributes it, says, "Do business until I come back." So sure enough, he's away. They have the opportunity to do the business. The CEO invests the 5, doubles it. The lower management, the lead man, the lead woman, doubles his or hers. Here comes the janitor. He says, "Well, here it is. Just here's the one you gave me. Here you go. Take it." What? Well, he says, "Actually, I got to thinking about this, and I know what a shrewd businessman you are. You're so shrewd. You not only are growing your own business, but you take over other businesses. In other words, where you haven't really invested, you're just buying up businesses, other men's labors. Okay, where you haven't sown, okay, you're reaping. Be like Donald Trump, I suppose, buying out other businesses that he himself hasn't built. Okay? Plus, he's building his own. Okay." So he says, "I knew you were that kind of businessman. I didn't want to take a chance of losing this thing, so I just buried it, and I went and dug it up. I heard you were coming, so I went and ran and dug it up. Here it is. Haven't lost anything for you." You would think, maybe humanly, you would think, well, okay, all right, at least I haven't lost anything. No. Again, all throughout his ministry, he's been teaching us the value of obedience and the value of ending up with him versus the most unfortunate situation of being separated from him. Okay? He's been warning people. Okay? So let's read verse 23. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. So we know he's going into the camp of the saints. He's going into the barracks. Protected. Okay? The other soldiers are. Jesus' army. But then verse 24. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou wert a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid. Well, apparently you weren't afraid enough. Okay, we're to fear the Lord, right? Fear the Lord. Beginning of wisdom. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant. Now wait a minute now. What about the good and faithful? I heard you tell him good and faithful, good and faithful. What? Wicked and slothful. What are you talking about? This is the warning. Not everyone's going to get the same piece of pie. You knew that I reaped where I sowed not, and gathered where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with interest. At least, if you couldn't invest it directly, at least, think this thing through. The standing order was to invest. Was it not? All three, invest. You didn't have the confidence then in yourself, as these other two people in management, to do that. So then you drop back and you rethink. Standing order, okay? I don't want to ignore the order. I just have to figure out how to comply with the order in some other way. You improvise. That's what Jesus did not let him off the hook. Then you should have done this. You should have then handed it over to those who are business-minded, who do have business sense, so that they could invest on your behalf, get the interest I was looking for, and everything would have been fine. But oh no. No, you copped out. You copped out. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which has 10 talents. So the one that had 10, he gets another one. For unto everyone that hath shall be given. Okay? He had pleased his Lord, he had invested, he had increased, he shall be given. And he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not, him that didn't have anything to give back to his Lord, shall be taken away even that which he had. Took the talent from him and gave it to the guy with the 10. And cast you the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. How much clearer can he put it that there's going to be consequence for bad judgment, bad decisions. Okay? And the opposite is there's going to be consequences for good decisions and good judgment. He'll make sure of that. Amen? He'll make sure of that. So, I want to be in that camp. I want to be in that camp. I want to be among the armies of the Lord and be ready for when Jesus comes. Okay? As ready as we possibly can be with our faults and failings, our sin. Just try, as Noah said, just try to overcome these things, and not let sin have its grip on us. Okay, amen. Shall we stand this morning and sing our invocation song?